Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and Happy New Year and Happy Holidays. I do hope that you've been having a peaceful, even joyful season. I know that those things can be high bars to reach sometimes in this season, especially for us as sensitive women. It can be an kind of overwhelming time for many of us. I know personally this past several weeks has been quite a lot on top of all the holiday stuff and preparation and all that. We had a pretty big chicken emergency. We are new chicken farmers, and we didn't even realize that this thing that happened could happen. But to put it mildly, they started pecking at each other to the point where one died without us realizing what was going on before we caught what was going on. And then another one got quite severely injured. And we've been having to isolate the chickens. We literally have 3 chickens right now in our basement in separate boxes. Now our basement is kind of part of our living space, so it's been interesting. We've been having to tend to them with a lot of the time. And we have to watch the 3 that are still in the flock very, very carefully so that they don't keep up this really damaging habit. So anyway, a little snapshot from my life. I hope you haven't had anything like that going on. I hope if there's been any stress or overstimulation, it has to do with working towards something fun and festive this holiday season. In any case, today we are going to look at one of the biggest ways unhappiness, to put it simply, sneaks into our marriages. And that is via non-acceptance, and why the antidote, acceptance, is just so important, as illustrated by my 2 marriages. I'm going to tell you some stories. And we're also going to look further into a deeper cultural root cause, or really failure, that keeps many of us from reaping the gifts of deep acceptance of our partner. And then we're going to turn that all on its head. Also, we're going to end with a kind of New Year's reset process to help get the ball rolling with really embracing the humanness of your partner, which is this antidote to non-acceptance. So buckle up, let's go. And let me just say, this is a really important episode and a really great one for beginning the new year, which is such an amazing time for deep self-reflection, looking ahead to what it is you really want to bring into your life this year. And if you're wanting your relationship to feel sweeter, more deeply connected, more full of love, then this is a really great starting place to make some fundamental, beautiful changes, starting right away, starting with some deep self-reflection. So listen all the way through and then take some time to sit with and answer the questions that I offer you at the end of this episode. So I have been really looking deeply over the last several months at what I've done that has made my marriage so loving and wonderful. Of course, this is something I am always kind of doing, right? Because my marriage is in some ways a laboratory for how I help you, how I learn to help you in your marriage. Now, of course, there are many things that I've done to help make my marriage so loving and wonderful, but at the root of it all, I have taken charge on purpose of how I perceive things. And as part of that, I have worked to perceive my husband, his full self, as acceptable, to deeply and truly accept my husband's humanness, and of course my own as well. Not to try to fix it or spruce it up, but to embrace it, to be at peace with the harder parts of our humanness, and even to feel warmth towards those aspects of my husband that I would not really have chosen had I had the choice. And this, to be very clear, does not mean that I don't also ask for him to address those parts of him that can make life harder together and more difficult, or that I tolerate mistreatment from him. No way, Jose, I definitely do not. And at the same time, I very much always choose to move towards feeling peace about those things, those difficult things, the places where he doesn't quote unquote behave the way I want him to. In other words, I choose towards real acceptance of those things because when we accept, we feel peace. That's how we actually know we are actually accepting something or someone, by that feeling of peace that comes over us. Or at least that sense of neutrality, not numbness, but neutrality or peace. And once again, before going further, I want to reiterate that acceptance is not resignation or tolerance. It is making peace with things as they are. True peace. So if I don't choose to accept and make peace with the parts of my husband and the behaviors of his that I don't like, it's like fighting his very humanity. In fact, it's rejecting parts of him, the parts that are literally a genetic and cultural inheritance, which he himself did not really choose. It's just so anti-humanness and anti-love, really, at least real love. So I want to unpack what I just said more in a few minutes, so stay tuned. But first I want to tell you about my own story with acceptance and how this was not always how I operated. Like getting to a place of real acceptance or more and more acceptance didn't just happen by itself. So in my first marriage, I really didn't fully accept my husband. There was a lot of expecting him to make me feel certain ways, a lot of trying to get him to be certain ways or stop being other ways. I don't think I realized at that point how many expectations I had that kept me from just being at peace with the human he is. I mean, I loved him, but maybe selectively. There was always some way he was falling short. He was too spacey, too non-communicative, too easily stressed out, too distant, too quiet. I wanted him to talk more. I wanted him to reach out more in affection, be more confident, be happier, get more organized, bring up deep topics more. I pushed him in many ways to be better. But the truth, it actually just made things worse and harder between us. I know I've told you this before, but over time, he felt shame about who he was as a husband and even as a person. And he was less able to grow and open up and be vulnerable and loving with me because of me pushing and not accepting him. I talk a lot about the backfiring tactics, how out of a desire for something beautiful in our relationship, like deeper connection, we tend to use approaches that actually create more division, more shutdown, more reactivity and conflict. Well, many of them spring from non-acceptance of who our partner is, and this idea that we can change them or make them into the perfect or at least a pretty awesome partner. But it really most often backfires. It hurts our relationships and exhausts us because it's a lot of work trying to make someone into our vision of who they should be for us. Yeah, I know some of you really feel that. Now, it's all too easy to fall into this trap of thinking we love someone, but not actually accepting who they are. So I don't want you to, if this resonates with you at all, this isn't to shame you at all, of course. This is very, very normal and common for humans because hello, default human brain. It's very, very natural in our modern world with our cultural conditioning, and etc., which again, we're going to talk about in a minute. But the truth is, you can feel so much happier when you do make the conscious choice to accept your spouse for all of who they are. Now, I know that's lofty, but it's a beautiful ambition and really a beautiful process. So for me, as soon as I stopped expecting him to make me happy and stopped judging him for all the ways he wasn't doing a good job of it, and I stopped focusing on all of those things, then I felt acceptance of him and even appreciation for him and even my love for him more clearly again. But it took me leaving to get there. So this is really interesting. I noticed that leaving our marriage was like flicking on an acceptance switch. The peace with who he is switch. It was really like day and night. Now, after reflection, I realized that this was because I dropped my struggle of trying to make him into the man I expected him to be, the man I was told by the world a husband should be. I stopped measuring him against that ideal because, well, he wasn't that person that was supposed to fit that husband mold or role anymore. So all of those ideals that I had been superimposing on him and trying to get him to kind of live up to dropped away. And what was left? Just me seeing him for who he was. And there was so much sweetness there, so much to love, really. Not that I wanted to go back to him. I think I just had enough of our dynamic and I was really ready at that point in my life to move on. But I really did learn a huge lesson about accepting another person for who they are. Their less than ideal parts, their quote unquote shortcomings, their messy humanness. I learned that there really is a lot to love, enough to love in them, even with all of these things. And that acceptance is the medicine to feeling peace with the whole of who they are and what they bring to the relationship. That acceptance is the medicine that heals and rejuvenates the marriage, not them changing. So yeah, I left my first marriage to learn this acceptance lesson. I mean, looking back, that's what I did. I certainly didn't do that on purpose. But you don't have to leave to get there. Because I haven't left my second marriage, despite my husband having just as many places he quote unquote falls short as compared to some idealized version of a husband I had had in my head most of my life. I've worked to keep the acceptance switch on in this marriage, and it really has made a huge difference. So much more love is accessible for and from him because of this. And you too can turn that switch on in this relationship. And that means you can have that love for him as he is, and that will likely open up his heart to you even more. And be clear, this doesn't mean you don't get to work on growing and inviting and influencing him to grow. Your relationship can still grow, of course. In fact, it will grow better and faster. Acceptance doesn't mean sucking up and dealing, especially empowered acceptance, which I did a whole episode about. You should definitely check that one out if you're interested in this whole topic and you're worried acceptance is like tolerating or making excuses. So that episode is 114. But empowered acceptance in a nutshell is more like, this is him, this is who he is, I accept that, and I can also influence better listening or more cozy hugs or whatever the thing is that you want. But that, ironically, starts with accepting him. Now, in my second marriage, even though it has taken some work and time to keep that acceptance switch on or turn it back on when I accidentally let it switch off again, it really is the thing that continues to make things so good and fun and playful and truly loving. Now, again, I'm not perfect at it, but we don't have to be. I'm not saying, hey, you need to have perfect acceptance to have a good relationship. My brain still judges and gets annoyed at times, but it's like 100% better than it used to be. So I just know personally how powerful acceptance is and how key it is for the best marriage and for friendship too. What makes my relationship with my husband so good is the depth of my acceptance of him, which I continue to work on all the time. And it's also what makes my relationship with my ex-husband so good too. Like just this morning, we were texting about Christmas plans that we got kind of confused. And it was just like, feels so good because we really accept each other. We accept our mistakes and our flaws and our, imperfections. And it just makes for really kind communication. It makes for things with our kids to be so much more graceful and peaceful and loving. So, I could just go on and on. Now, I know I cannot tell you just accept your husband and you'll suddenly be able to do it, right? It's much more nuanced than that for sure. And of course, it can take some skill and some learning to be able to really do it. But if we do anything else, if we instead cling to blame and judgment and pushing him to be different, we will be less happy than we could be. Most often, way less happy, and so will he. And we will feel more pain, like we're being treated unfairly, like we aren't enough even. And I don't know if I want to go too deep into that, but oftentimes when we're trying to get the other person to change and they're not doing it, we feel bad, like they're not being loving to us because they're not changing how we want them to, right? Yeah, we'll feel like not enough to them, which of course is part of this tendency we have as humans toward non-acceptance, just kind of aimed back at ourselves when we feel not enough in some way or as a human being. But when we can move into acceptance, it doesn't just feel good, although it does. It lets you feel lighter and happier. But also, we are so much more skillful and effective with our partner when we feel those ways, when we feel peace, when we feel lightness, when we feel some happiness, right? The peace we feel leads to letting them be them. We are kinder. We are more open to them. We show up with more curiosity instead of judgment. And often there's suddenly more humor and joking and playfulness, more true enjoyment, which is my experience. And all of that is where connection and joy in relationships really comes from and blooms more. Now, here's the thing. It really can totally be hard to move into accepting your partner with all their imperfections. And this is, in large part, not because of you personally, but because we are all carrying a deeper root issue, a cultural legacy of intolerance for humanness. Now, I've been able to see this over the years in my work, really close, intimate work with my clients. And it's not just them, it's humans, right? It's modern humans in our modern society. So most of us were taught subtly and repeatedly that emotions should be kept together and contained quickly, and needs should be minimal, and behaviors in intimate relationships should be a very specific, certain way, and struggles should be outgrown. We were taught by society to judge our own emotions, our own messiness, non-linear and not together parts. And then, of course, we unconsciously expect others to get over all of that in themselves as well. So when our partner is messy, emotional, slow to change, or imperfect, it can feel irritating or threatening. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because we were conditioned to expect people, including ourselves, to be more contained, efficient, behaved, and together than real humans actually are. So this all leads to intolerance of very normal pieces of being a human being. So this is really a failure of our society when it comes to relationships. And much of it stems from a simple lack of psychological understanding or education. Even sort of biological understanding of the nervous system and brain and why we behave as we do as humans. Luckily, the love and intimacy we want in our marriages asks us to unlearn all these societal ideas and misunderstandings about how humans should, quote unquote, be. Let me say that again. The love and intimacy we want in our marriage asks us to unlearn all of that stuff for the sake of real love. Love of the fullness of our humanness, not just the pretty, efficient, behaved together pieces. Love for the full humans that we each are. In other words, for the best relationship, move into humanness acceptance of your partner and of yourself, of course, always. But that's a topic for another day. So I want to talk now about what has helped me and my clients to move into that humanness acceptance, at least some of what has helped. So the number one biggest thing is shifting our perceptions. Put another way, it is getting our stories out of the way. Like in the last couple of episodes, I've talked about learning to not spin stories in order to stop compare and despair, and also to benefit from the gift of your sensitivity. So if you listen to those, you'll remember maybe that I brought up this idea of, spinning stories. But in general, this is such a huge, important skill in our relationships in life. Because when we see through our stories, our narratives, or like the lenses that are all fogged up with expectations and judgments based on those expectations, we will have absolutely no way of getting to acceptance. We can't impose our ideals and expectations on our partner and hope for acceptance or even knowing who they really are. Another way to say this is what helps so much to move into acceptance of humanness is working on our very specific thoughts and beliefs and rooting out the ones that keep us from acceptance and compassion and love for our partners. Like rooting out the shoulds, quote unquote, the shoulds that I've talked about a bunch before on this podcast. If you're interested in that, check out episode 65 called Should Pain. That really is the number one way of getting to acceptance, looking at your thoughts and beliefs and choosing ones that feel more like peace and that lead to true acceptance. I do this work deeply with clients on an individual basis, as is the very best way to do it. Groups, of course, are great for this too, as most of us carry very similar beliefs and thoughts that keep us from acceptance. So when we look at and work with one person's beliefs in the group, it's really working on everyone's acceptance and peace and ability to love and connect better with their spouse. So that's pretty amazing to be part of. But one quick example of, a specific thought or belief that leads to very much non-acceptance is one recent client and I discovered a deep-seated belief she had that kept her from love and acceptance of her husband. Was specifically, men are inherently selfish jerks. I'm paraphrasing exactly what that thought is, but it was pretty much that. But you can see what a judgmental story that is, yeah? That thought, that story, obviously creates the opposite of acceptance. It creates resistance to who her husband is, and all men, and anger and resentment and hurt. So we had to unpack that belief and challenge it to see that not only was it not true most of the time for her husband, he's not most of the time inherently a selfish jerk, but it was hurtful for her to keep believing it, to keep seeing him and men in general through that lens, especially when there are many other ways to see things, many other lenses through which to look. So yes, thought and belief work, i.e. consciously choosing the stories or lenses you see through, is tremendously powerful. And it's why so much of my work is rooted in it. Like, man, it was so life-changing to learn this and how specifically to do this work. And I know it is absolutely the same for my clients. All right, so along those lines, here is another one of the biggest things that can help tremendously with the amount of acceptance you feel of your spouse. And that is learning about the human inheritance, meaning learning about the origin of our spouse's behavior and patterns and ways that we don't like the things about him that don't fit the contained, efficient, and together myth, or really the robot aspiration our society has infused in us, or even sort of this modern, perfect husband ideal that we're being fed all the time nowadays. So to put that more simply, another one of the biggest things that will help you create a deeper sense of acceptance of your partner is to learn about the aspects of him that are hard to accept, like why he is that way or does those things. And the answer is, it's almost always because of the equipment that your partner has come wired with, i.e. his brain and nervous system, along with the conditioning that shapes that wiring. So this is one reason I'm always trying to educate you about how our brains tend to work. How as human beings, we are biologically wired to not always behave so well relationally, at least in our modern, stressful, quote-unquote threatening world. I'm always trying to educate you about how our default lizard brain takes over and our survival nervous system takes over at any hint of threat. And boy, do our systems detect threat often. And also how our cultural and familial conditioning shapes our thinking, our beliefs, and therefore our behavior. In other words, again, unskillful and not great behavior is very rarely a personal fault or a unique to your spouse problem. It's so much bigger than an individual. It's human. It's truly a genetic inheritance. It didn't come from your partner. It came from us, from humans, from millions of years of our primal brain and nervous system's conditioning, which is just playing out in your partner and you too now. And then, of course, there's the family, the friends, and the people your partner grew up with or grew up surrounded by. They handed down their beliefs and their ways of seeing the world and relating to other human beings. They handed down their ignorance, their unskillfulness, their suffering, their confused and crazy teachings about how to be in this human body with all these human emotions and how to be in relationship to others. Which, of course, all of that was handed down to them through a long line of ancestry. Your partner, as a wee little human being who came into this world so tender, so malleable, could not help but inherit all of this. He could not help but be shaped by the huge misunderstandings and toxic relational teachings passed down by previous generations. Nor could you, by the way. It really is the love legacy we all have inherited in one shape or form. Some of us more than others, yes, but all of us. And without real concentrated effort and unlearning and new learning, your partner isn't suddenly going to just be different. He won't suddenly shrug off all of that just because you want him to. That is a heavy rock to get out from under, as someone once said to me. Now, my point really is not to scare you into feeling your partner is never going to change, but rather to help you accept and make peace with the aspects of your partner that you are not thrilled by. To show you that he didn't ask for this brain, this nervous system, or this conditioning that leads to all of these behaviors that you don't like. Just like you didn't ask for the things in you that are making it challenging to be in a relationship with you. But this is really our task if we want real, evolved, deep, mature love that lasts. To accept the humanness of each other, to meet it with understanding and even compassion and care. So not accepting your individual partner for less than great behavior is kind of like not accepting being a human being. And if there's anything that is painful and exasperating making, it's not accepting the very fact of being human. Now, just like you can often hold two things in your hands, I invite you to hold these two things in your mind. You can both accept all of his messy humanness and thereby suffuse your marriage with so much more safety and love. And you can also invite and inspire more growth from his end. More affection, softer tones, kinder communication, or whatever it is that you yearn for. I know these two things could feel kind of contradictory, but they really are more paradoxical. Just like you can love how well you play a song on the piano or a painting you made and still seek higher levels of playing or painting. So the more you accept him and show him that and love him with all his messy imperfections, which really is unconditional love, which is such a beautiful thing, the more safe and good he will feel with you. And there is nothing better than being with someone who just accepts and loves you for who you are and isn't trying to make you a better version of yourself. You get that for yourself. Yes, that's what you want, right? You want that from others? You want that from your partner? Absolutely, I do. Ironically, when you can do that for your husband, that is when he will want to be better for you too. And him changing does need to come, or really only will come from him wanting to grow, truly wanting to be his better or best self for you and with you. So I want to take a personal example here. I've talked about this before, and it's something my husband and I have struggled with and worked on in our relationship, and that is his quick defensiveness. Now, there has been so much progress with this over the years. He's not perfect, but definite growth. The best growth, the best shifts I've seen in him have come when I've met him with understanding and acceptance for his defensive tendencies. And it hasn't meant just tolerating his defensiveness. If you were a fly on the wall over the years watching my husband and I, you would see I am not a pushover at all. I'm not sitting around making excuses for those moments when he's reacting with strong defensiveness. But I am meeting it with understanding a lot of the time. I've done a lot of work on my own judgment of it, and I'm looking at why this would be going on for him, where it's coming from, and why it's hard for him to stop and break this pattern. And what I've found is I see that it's coming from conditioning, from his upbringing. I see his reactivity, his defensiveness comes from the way he and all of the rest of us have been wired for eons to see others as threats. In this case, that would be me, as a threat to his sense of being capable, because his defensiveness often arises when I point out something I want him to do or stop doing. And I see it as an inheritance passed down to him genetically from hundreds of generations of ancestors who were under the control of their ancient primal wiring, which we still are, right? We passed that down, and who never learned how to consciously work with that wiring. They kind of taught him this defensiveness. They passed it to him, or they didn't teach him how to not be defensive because they themselves never learned. So when I can remember this, it softens my judgment of him so much. It gets me to a place of acceptance, of peace. It's even allowed me to love him with his defensiveness, to feel a deep sort of sense of this is part of his patterning, not his essence. And it's a disadvantage, a sort of ball and chain he didn't choose to have around him, and something that can, with the right conditions, fall away. Or sometimes I just think of it as no big deal at all, like, here's some humanness. That's a really good one, actually. Here is some humanness coming up. And then I'm no longer aggravated. I no longer get hooked in by it. I feel peaceful. Of course, if I'm being honest, there are still moments when I'm not in acceptance of it, when I'm judging it. And when that happens, I react to it. And then he gets more defensive. And then I react to that. And then he gets even more defensive. And then we're just reacting and arguing. And we make absolutely zero progress. Actually, we just lock further in that habit that I don't like, his defensiveness. So not accepting actually stops the growth. It reinforces the very pattern we want to get away from, and it makes things worse. But when I do accept it, I can intervene skillfully in that pattern because I feel peaceful enough to have the presence of mind to say something in a kind, compassionate way that diffuses the defensiveness. Or I say I need some time to calm down and reflect and take care of myself and take a time out so we can calmly discuss the issue later. And when we come back together, that's when I lovingly remind him of his goal of not being defensive and sharing about what's going on for him with openness and ownership and vulnerability. And so he learns. And we feel like a loving team, actively growing the joy and love in our marriage. So my acceptance and compassion helps him grow and evolve in great ways in our relationship. So let me say this super clearly. When we meet our partner with genuine acceptance and understanding and compassion, we are not forfeiting our power of influence over how loving and supportive and joy-filled our marriage is. We are strengthening that power. We are strengthening that power. So the more we can understand our own societal conditioning that keeps us from acceptance, which is really not understanding much of what I've shared today, and understanding our human inheritance that makes us messy, not always contained, together, and graceful. The more we can really see that in our partner, the more we can truly feel peace with the not so great aspects of his. The more power and influence and leverage we actually do have to have a loving, supportive, joy-filled marriage. So I want to give you now your reflection prompts. I want you to take some time and self-reflect in order to generate more genuine acceptance of your partner. So I highly recommend writing these down and then spending some time answering them. I'm just going to go right through them. So take some notes. What parts of your partner's humanness are you not accepting? So an easier question might be, where are you judging him or resisting who he is or the things he does? Where do you feel that subtle or not so subtle better than feeling or frustration feeling or anger feeling? How does not accepting him or these aspects of him feel to you? How does it feel when you're not accepting? How does your body feel? How does your heart feel? What does it lead to between you and in general in your relationship when you're not accepting and you're feeling that particular way? Like, how do you show up and what does that lead to? And do you like that? Do you like what that creates? When you're coming from this place of non-acceptance and you interact with him from there, do you like what that leads to? Are you willing to put effort into making peace with the things about him that you don't like or that society taught you to reject instead of trying to change your partner? Kind of different angled question here. What did your partner inherit relationally? What did he inherit from family, from culture? Look at his caregivers for clues. Like if you know his parents or caregivers, maybe you can see some things that they passed down to him unconsciously. Are you open to learning to accept and ultimately love all of him? Messy humanness and everything. What specifically about him or his behaviors do you want to feel chill about or like is no big deal? Like today, this week, but are currently having a hard time doing. Make a little list. And, this is a really beautiful thing to reflect on this. And I want you to know this is really just about noticing. We're not bringing judgment of ourselves into this. We're just noticing. So from that list of the things that you want to feel acceptance about now, like today or this week, I want you to choose one thing, and then get started accepting him or accepting that part of him by reminding yourself something along these lines. This is part of his humanness, or here's some humanness coming up. This is something I can learn to see as not a big deal, as part of the messy, wonderful package of being human in a complicated mind, body, heart system, and society. So I'm going to say that one more time. This is something I can learn to see as not a big deal, as part of the messy, wonderful package of being a human in a complicated mind, body, heart system, and society. That is a new perception. That is a new belief you can try on. Those are new lenses you can look through at this, whatever this thing is you're choosing, to bring more acceptance to cultivate more acceptance of. If there's some other thought or belief here that helps you personally bring in more acceptance, then use that instead. I'm just giving you a suggestion and one that feels really good to me, one that really helps me feel much more acceptance of my husband's things I don't love so much. So do this process for a week or so, and then choose another thing from your list to do the same for. This is how you can start really building the muscle of truly, genuinely accepting your partner in his messy, flawed, beautiful humanness. And it's one of the biggest tickets to a truly unconditionally loving, light, joyful marriage. And if you want to take this all further, if you're at this point in time, at this New Year's threshold, are ready to make this next year the year where your relationship truly becomes the very loving, connected, safe, secure, and completely mutually supportive one that you really want, come coach one-to-one with me. It will be one of the best things you've ever done for yourself and the best thing you've ever done for your marriage. To get started, check out the link in the description, or you can head over to hspmarriagecoaching.com and click the Work Privately with Me tab. I often get an influx of new clients right at this time of year. So if you're interested, don't hesitate. I don't want you to have to wait months. It would be my true honor and joy to help you make your marriage the most loving and wonderful it's ever been. All right, my friends, once again, Happy New Year, and may this year be the most love-filled one yet. Be oh so well.